Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over how to find your perfect sensitivity if you play Fortnite on controller. Obviously, it's important to find sensitivity values that you personally feel really comfortable with. If you aren't able to do that, your aim is really going to suffer, and it's going to be harder for you to improve your aim in both the short and long term. Now, what a lot of people will do when they're looking to change their sensitivity is just copy some pro player that they think is really good. And even though that definitely isn't a terrible starting point, it shouldn't be all that you do when it comes to picking your sensitivity. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to discuss in this video is the importance of picking a sensitivity that fits your playstyle and skill level. As I alluded to in the intro, there are a few different potential pitfalls to just straight up copying a certain pro settings. Let me give you an example of how this can go very bad and why you want to avoid it. One of the best controller players on the planet right now is CRR, incredibly talented EU player, has a lot of fans, and I'm sure throughout the last year or so, plenty of people have copied his sensitivity. The problem is CRR plays on some of the highest sensitivity values that I've ever seen. Now for him, that makes sense because it fits his playstyle perfectly. He's a super aggressive player that's an insane box fighter and has insane shotgun and SMG aim, so he would very likely be less successful on a lower sensitivity. But the hard truth is that 99.99999% of players would be terrible if they use CRR settings because it would just be so hard to control because it's so high. So the first thing you need to do if you want to find your perfect sensitivity is think about your playstyle, your skill level, and also your strengths and weaknesses as a player. Starting with playstyle, just think for a second. If you're more of a backline support player, someone who tries to keep most fights at medium to long range, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to use super high sensitivity values because medium to long range fights are all about precision. On the flip side, if you're someone who loves to psycho into people's 1x1s, barrel stuff with SMGs, and maybe go for shotgun flicks fairly frequently, obviously low sensitivity values don't really fit that playstyle. So if you're going to start off by copying sensitivity values from a pro, at least make sure you're picking one who you feel has a somewhat similar playstyle to you. The next thing you have to consider is your overall skill level, especially when it comes to aim. The general rule of thumb that applies in most video games is that the worse your aim is, the lower you want your sensitivity to be. Now that definitely isn't some set in stone unbreakable rule because there are plenty of pros with insane aim that use low sense, but it's still something you definitely want to consider at least as a starting point. If you're using 40% and you feel like you can't hit your shotgun shots, it's very unlikely that raising your sensitivity is going to fix that problem, and in reality, it's probably going to make it worse. However, if you feel like your aim is solid, but the main problem you have is tracking enemies who are super elusive because you can't keep up with them, that would be a scenario where an increase to sensitivity would probably be the optimal play. This also applies to building and editing sensitivity as well. The higher the sensitivity is, the faster you're going to be able to build and edit. So if you feel like you very rarely mess up edits on 1.7 edit sense, for example, I would strongly recommend at least giving 1.8 or maybe 1.9 a try. You may hate it and revert back to 1.7 eventually, but if you can become just as comfortable on that new sensitivity, it increases your skill ceiling for editing because your speed is increased. And obviously the opposite applies here as well, just like it does with shotgun aim. If you can't consistently hit edits on 1.7, then 1.8 is only going to make it worse, and you'd probably be best served going down to 1.6. So that's a general overview of everything you want to consider whenever you're contemplating a sensitivity change. Now let's get a bit more technical about it. One of the best ways to quickly tell if your sensitivity is either too low or too high is to take clips of yourself while playing. For For aiming, I would take clips of you getting into maybe 2 to 3 close range fights and then 2 to 3 medium or longer range fights. And then for editing, I would record like a 1-minute long clip of you doing an editing course. This should be relatively easy to do no matter what platform you play on, because at least to my knowledge, they all have ways to record clips immediately after they happen, which is perfect. So once you've done that and now you have a couple of clips, you want to watch them and slow them down to roughly 0.5 speed or so, and pay attention to how you're missing the shots that you're missing or the edits. With aim, for example, let's say you're moving your crosshair from left to right and you find that you're consistently firing after the crosshairs traveled past the enemy's body. That's a sign that your sensitivity is probably too high. Then obviously on the flip side, if you're going from left to right and you see yourself firing before the crosshair hits the enemy's body, that would indicate that you're too low, you're struggling to track, and you need to raise your sensitivity. And of course, you can just apply the same principles for aiming up and down as well for vertical sensitivity. I feel like it's even easier to do this test for editing because, unlike with aiming, you can be in the controlled environment of an editing course. Simply free edit for, like I said, around a minute straight maybe, then review the footage and use the same principles as with the aim clips. If you find that on the edits you're missing, you're hitting confirm too late and your crosshair is going too far, that obviously means that you should try to explore lowering your editing sensitivity. And obviously, if you're confirming too early, then raising it is going to likely be the move. I mentioned in a previous video that I've used this method myself, and I legitimately credit it so much for improving my editing because it led to me changing my sensitivity. So once you've gotten a general idea of whether you need to go higher or lower, the question then becomes, well, how much lower or higher should I go? If I'm on 40% non-ADS sense and I see that I'm missing a lot of shots because my sense is too high, should I go to 39, 35, 30? What's the answer? Well, one thing that you never want to do with sensitivity is raise or lower your values by anything more than about 3% in one go. If you make a really dramatic change, like going from 40 to 32, for example, all that muscle memory you built up aiming on 40% basically goes out the window because now your new sensitivity is just so much different. It would be like practicing shooting free throws with a basketball for a week straight and then randomly switching to a volleyball and expecting to see the same level of success. The much better option is to move your sensitivity either up or down very slowly on a day-by-day basis. I recommend moving your sensitivity either up or down by 1 to 2%, then putting in about 3 to 4 hours of game time with that sensitivity. It obviously doesn't have to all be in one session, you can space it out over multiple days, and then once you've hit that 3 to 4 hours, you can decide from there if you want to continue going up or down or stay put at whatever value you're at. And for building an editing sensitivity, obviously it's a multiplier, not a percent, so the lowest you can increase or decrease it is by 0.1, and that's what I do for the same 3 to 4 hours of game time before changing it again. Doing that for aim, editing, and building sense makes it so that you maintain good muscle memory, and also, more importantly, so you don't build bad aiming habits because you're using a sensitivity that you really can't control. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. Let me know the last time that you changed your sensitivity in Fortnite. Was it recently, has it been a while, or anything else in between? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.